Good morning, everyone. My name is Louis Gutierrez. I am the Alumni Relations Manager here at UCSF, and I work with both the retirees and the Emeriti Faculty Associations. If you have any questions, we will be taking these at the end of the event, and I'm going to introduce Dorla Cantu, who is our Educational Program Committee head, and she's going to introduce our speaker.
Okay, thanks, Louis. Welcome, everyone. We're having Trash Talk, and our speaker is Vincent Yuen, who is the founder of Refuse Refuse, a grassroots volunteer effort dedicated to trash-free neighborhoods. Individuals come together to pick up and remove the trash that litters San Francisco. They organize cleanups, help others establish their own, and educate residents on what they can do to keep their neighborhoods, parks, beaches, and public spaces clean. Vince says he's just another San Franciscan who cares about a clean environment. He started out cleaning his block with his two daughters, who were then 5 and 7. Then he discovered others already picking up trash and spread the word to neighbors from all over the city who have joined the Refuse Refuse movement to keep the city clean. He ultimately discovered that caring for San Francisco is his greatest passion. And just a note before Vince starts talking, in honor of Earth Day, Saturday, April 22nd, our Retirees Association is sponsoring a community activity inspired by Vince and his movement. We'll gather at the Faculty Alumni House, 745 Parnassus, at 10:30 that day, and pick up trash around the Parnassus Heights campus and the surrounding area. Safety materials will be provided, and there will be snacks and refreshments. All are welcome, you, your kids, your grandkids. Please join us 10:30 to noon, April 22nd, Faculty Alumni House. And now please welcome Vince.
Thank you for the intro, Dorla. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining today. Again, yeah, I'm Vince, and about 2 years ago started this campaign, Refuse Refuse, to try to, bring some more awareness and organization to trying to keep the city clean. That's from a residents and citizen side of it. And so, my background was sales and marketing. I was stuck at home during the pandemic trying to get my kids out of the house to do something, not, tearing my hair out. And we started cleaning our own block. And after a couple of weeks, it really, really worked. And so I just wanted to find out, if other people were doing similar things. Are there models for ways to keep the city clean? And I found people like Pauline Chin, who has been doing this for a long time, and her sister Liz, and all these other groups that have been kind of doing it piecemeal, disparate. And thankfully here we have a lot of resources from our Department of Public Works. I just went about just trying to create a branded effort. My background, again, sales and marketing. Like, we need some kind of banner to stand behind that represents the collective effort that we're doing. And so that's where Refuse Refuse came from. I threw on a website and then posted on Nextdoor. I organized my first cleanup in April of 2021, and half the people who showed up I didn't know. And the light bulb went off, and like, maybe there's something here. So this presentation is called San Francisco Trash Talk, and it kind of goes over a lot of the research that I did to just try to understand the problem of why San Francisco is so dirty, which objectively it is. I've been here 20 years, and I think you just at some point become numb to it because it just fades into the background. You just accept it as part of the urban landscape. And so my calling is that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be normal. We should normalize a clean culture and clean environment for everybody. And there are things that we can do. So like I said, I'll just launch into this presentation. If you have questions, we'll save it for the end. That's the best part, which is the Q&A afterwards. But again, this is called San Francisco Trash Talk. And it's broken into 4 parts. The first is just discussing what's the problem. Like, why is there actually so much trash and litter on the streets of San Francisco? 2, why is that important? Why should we care? 3, possible solutions to address the issues. And then finally, 4, what can you on an individual level do to affect change? So first is just the problem. There really is trash everywhere. And the main reason for that, is the production of single-use materials in our modern society, and the rise of e-commerce And so, here in San Francisco specifically, our geography actually plays a big part of the reason why there's so much trash. We'll touch upon the infrastructure, the ways that we try to maintain and keep the trash at bay. And then finally, people, again, without us, there is no trash. So, first off, San Francisco, we're the microclimate capital of the world. You never leave home without a jacket if you're smart. And so wind conditions, weather conditions change from neighborhood to neighborhood, hour to hour. We're surrounded by water on three sides, which creates a lot of unique weather patterns. And then we're actually one of the top 10 windiest cities in the US for major cities. Our average wind speed's 10.6 miles per hour, which is actually windier than Chicago. So if you're going to blame anything, you can blame the wind for scattering a lot of the trash around. The two professional groups that are responsible for keeping the city clean are on the left, San Francisco Public Works, which is a city government agency. They maintain the infrastructure like public trash cans. They do the street sweeping. They have these corridor ambassadors that clean along commercial districts. Amongst other things they do, filling potholes, traffic signal lights, etc. Recology, they're our municipal solid waste monopoly, and they are the ones who maintain the residential and commercial curbside pickups, so our black, green, and blue bins. They actually have roots in these kind of disparate Italian immigrant families. I think at one time there's 96 different kind of small family-owned businesses that were waste haulers and scavengers. And over the years, they've consolidated finally into, I think, Sunset Scavengers and Golden Gate, some kind of service. But then they combined to form Recology. So even our modern Recology has roots in these Italian families that lived in North Beach, and most of them came from the specific region in Italy. So Recology does quite a bit. Obviously, there's been some controversy lately with some of their collusion, and so they don't have the best PR right now, but they do actually do quite a bit. But again, human beings, we have to take responsibility for this. Without us, there is not this production of all these consumer packaged goods. Our consumption habits, our purchasing habits create this, and so it's very convenient with to-go, products that are wrapped and shipped around the world. But there's a price to pay for that convenience, which is all these additional waste materials that can end up into the environment. There's actually an anthropological study called garbology. They started by this professor named Bill Rathje. They have a big program in Arizona, University of Arizona. But you can actually become a doctor in garbology. And so they typically study where waste goes through the waste stream from production to final resting spot. And unfortunately, a lot of the final resting spot is in the environment. So, again, we do at some point have to take some kind of personal responsibility for the trash. Littering rates. So actually, back in 1969, there's this campaign called Keeping America Beautiful, which is actually still active. And they did a study where they saw that about 50%, half the population actively littered. So top left, I have this clip from the show Mad Men, which is following people based in the 50s and 60s. And so Don Draper just finished his beer. What does he do? He chucks it into the park. And so his wife afterwards, you'll see what she does with the picnic blanket. And so it's much more common culturally to litter back then. And then thanks to these many public service announcements, here in the middle is probably the most famous one, called the Crying Indian campaign, which ran for many, many years. Down here, bottom left, is the Give a Hoot, Don't Pollute campaign, which is what I grew up with in the 80s. They basically had this creepy owl that would go around scaring kids into doing the right thing. But it worked. They did a follow-on study 40 years later, and they saw that littering rates have reduced 60% down to 15%. Now, 15% is still quite a lot, but that's quite a reduction just on these kind of internalizing that behavior, that it is on us to be responsible for the environment. Now, this is also one of the kind of first examples of greenwashing. This Crying Indian campaign was actually funded by the bottling industry, putting the onus on all of us. Whereas there is some responsibility from the producers as well to meet us halfway, that they should be helping us create systems where there's less waste materials, more reusable, recyclable materials. But that takes a lot of us to speak up, to also hold them to account, to come meet us halfway. Unfortunately, with the rise of plastics, plastic packaging, the composition of that litter has increased 165% makeup in plastics. And plastics are terrible because they never actually go away. They just degrade into tiny microplastics that leach into the environment. There's studies that show the majority of humans have traces of plastic or PFAS in us because of the widespread use of these things. And a lot of that comes from cigarette butts. I did not know this, but cigarette butts contain a plastic called cellulose acetate that leaches into the environment, in addition to all the other toxins that are found in cigarette butts. If you count 100 pieces of trash very consistently, 35 of those will be cigarette butts. So they are the #1 most littered item. And every piece of cigarette butt litter is, for the most part, is actively littered, right? Whereas a lot of the stuff that we find in the street is because the wind blew it out of a trash can. So if someone had tried to do the right thing behaviorally, but other circumstances cause that litter, whereas cigarette butts, it's very intentional. So this is something that we definitely have a huge focus on. We do many things well here in San Francisco. So they did a comparative study between San Francisco and other cities. Our public services responded to by far the most requests, 77,000 in that year. I think the next highest was Baltimore with like 35,000. Most of the other cities and municipalities had about 10, 15,000 service requests. They have 5 major cleaning categories that they determine. Our city provides all 5 of them and regularly, whereas some other cities don't have all 5, and if they do, they can be infrequent service. But we have this zero waste goal, so we've done things like banning plastic bags for the most part. If you buy an iced coffee or a boba, you usually get a paper straw. So we've actually reduced the amount of landfill waste by about half over the past 20 years. So, they shrunk our black bins. Most of us have our capacity is our blue bins. So again, some things we're doing well. Renewables, Recology states that 80% of what goes into blue bins actually get recycled. I think it's much, much lower than that. A lot of that is the end markets, like particularly China has reduced their consumption and purchasing of these materials, especially based on contamination rates. So a lot of what we get put in our blue bins are not usable because they're too dirty, they're contaminated. So to clean them and process them does not make sense. We have a new program called Bottle Bank, and so they have kind of like a full life cycle stream where they can actually, on the ledger know that these bottles and cans can actually be recycled. So something to look out for. We do use half the water as the state average, and we actually have twice the solar installations as the national average. So again, we kind of are still leaders in environmentalism, but a lot to do, a lot to go. So finally, you understand that there is trash. Why does that even matter? Who should even care? We've all lived our best life here in San Francisco. We're doing pretty good, but why should you even care? First off is very basic, health and safety. So here on the left is this book called Slum Health. There's 2 professors at Berkeley who wrote this book, and they looked at conditions in third world slums. And unfortunately, here in San Francisco, we have some neighborhoods that have those same, if not worse, conditions. Here is a picture, a heat map of all the poop incidents reported in the city in that year. So as you can see, San Francisco is very brown, even very dark brown in some neighborhoods. Upper right is an app that a young developer created called Snapcrap, where you could take pictures of poop and share it with your friends and report it to 311. I don't know why anyone would want to do that, but cheers to them. Hazards, we see needles and broken glass and poop and other hazardous waste. And, these are things that are hazardous to any of us, and especially, pets. I see a lot of posts and a lot of people have told me stories about dogs eating something they shouldn't have. I learned that chicken bones can be dangerous. They can choke on them. The other idea is crime. So the broken window theory, some have proved or disproven it, but from the anecdotal evidence and also some data about violent crime in neighborhoods that are blighted versus that are cared for, it definitely makes sense. The idea of the broken window theory, that places that are cared for tend to stay more cared for. Places that are in disrepair tend to attract more antisocial behavior. Here I have a picture of a homeless person so we can speak to them. So yes, homeless people absolutely contribute to the trash on our streets. All of us would too if all of our worldly possessions were out there and we lived there. But I often say, like, it's actually a very small percentage of the trash by volume that we see out there. Most of it's just like little pieces of trash that are scattered everywhere. But when you put it together, it's quite a bit. So even if the homeless population was scattering trash out there full time, it wouldn't come close to what we see collectively on the streets. And I also argue that homeless people have a much lower carbon footprint than any of us. If you take one plane flight, that's more than they create in a whole year. So, just to draw kind of the parallels of kind of scapegoating homeless people for a lot of the problems we have in the city. Again, since we're surrounded by water on three sides, we definitely have an extra responsibility to keep our environment clean. Our storm drain system, we have a combined sewer system that does treat a lot of what goes in there, but like these recent storms, oftentimes it overflows that system. And so what goes into the storm drain often goes directly into the bay and into the ocean. And again, all the hazardous waste and trash just ends up there. So again, if we can really be more conscious and keep it clean and healthy, we'll do good things for the ocean, the bay, and ourselves. So I have these shock value pictures. You've seen this, but most of what's there on a day-to-day does not look like this. But really, it's to draw the contrast of what our city looks like from time to time and what it really could look like in these pictures. We live in one of the most beautiful and prosperous cities in the United States. If we're world class, we really got to step up and keep it that way. So we see pockets of this where it's cared for. Tourist areas, revenue generating areas often have cleaner streets. But I like this for all the neighborhoods so that we really can have that identity of a clean city. So what's the answer? What are possible solutions that can be done? So first is just gathering data. So, really understanding what the situation is out there to attack it. And so initially, when I first started doing these cleanups, a lot of it was just what we call waste audits, where we go to a specific intersection and just count the trash that's there. My idea is, like, if we are embarking on this effort to keep the city clean, how do we even know how much trash is out there and if we're affecting change? And so here we counted 469 pieces of trash. This is an intersection at Fillmore and Sutter. Doesn't really help that there's a Muni Stop at one end and a Burger King at the other, but we cleaned it completely. And the next week we came back and we counted 304 pieces of trash. So yes, the trash came back, but even with one cleaning, you reduce that by about 30%. And so when you clean regularly, we've seen areas that have reduced their trash by about 75, 80% reductions. Here too, there was a lady who owns this strange kind of Korean pharmacy, and she saw us and I gave her one of our trash pickers. And since there, I've seen her cleaning up fairly regularly. I go back to this section, it looks so much cleaner, and just one person, getting involved doing it. Another interesting fun fact, west sides of street have more trash than east sides of street typically. And that's because the wind comes from the ocean. And so those buildings on the west side block the wind, and it creates kind of this eddy and this wind pattern that blows everything over to the west side. And so if you have limited resources, then you'd obviously want to direct them to the west side of the streets if you're going to clean one side or the other. There's this local company called Rubbish that has this app they developed. There's other popular apps like Literati and Clean Swell are two popular ones. But again, what they're doing is creating technology that you can categorize and count the trash that's on the street. And so, they did some projects here in San Francisco along Polk Street where they're creating heat maps specifically of cigarette butt litter. So they have this cool picker with a Bluetooth actuator on it. You can hook up your phone to it, and when you pull the trigger, it snaps a photo, and then you can categorize it. So you can also see what's the makeup of the trash in that neighborhood. So again, cigarette butts here, they created the heat map, and then this informed maybe where they put infrastructure like butt cans hung on poles, or where the trash cans are placed, or the routing of the street cleaners to pick up trash. So again, another example of using data to inform us of how to best attack that. Trash cans, so kind of on the fence on this as a solve. So here on the left is our standard trash can right now. It's called the Renaissance can. but they're pretty garbage. You know, they're open. People can rummage through them. I see crows and raccoons pulling things out. They have a pretty small capacity. Here on the right are a little bit better. These are called big belly trash cans, which you see mainly in these commercial retail districts. They're fully contained, so people can't pull them out. They have a nice little kickstand, so it gets rid of that ick factor having to touch it. Many of them have solar panels on top that power a compactor that compact the trash, so they don't have to be emptied as frequently. But these the handles and the doors break and they fail, so people just end up throwing the trash at the base of these things. People vandalize and steal the solar panels, which makes it inoperable. So, you know, and they're also very expensive. They're about over $1,000 to rent per year. But, you know, if you have more trash cans that, you know, people were more likely to use them. There's data that shows that people will walk up to 30, 40 feet to throw something away. After that, rates of littering increase. If you have more trash cans, there's more capacity for trash to be there, and so they don't have to be emptied as often. But A, people still have to use them, and B, they do have to be emptied more regularly. And I see plenty of trash cans that are not. Gavin Newsom, when he was mayor of the city, actually took out a lot of the public trash cans under the pretense that they attract a lot of illegal dumping and trash piles, which they do, but I don't believe that the waste has decreased. It's just found other places to be illegally dumped or scattered. So again, I don't know that trash cans are a silver bullet. And we do have some new trash cans coming. You may have seen in the news that we've had these like $20,000 prototype trash cans, which I think is fine for a prototype, but I don't know that a new design will solve it. Maybe it will help with not having to be open and being able to rummage. But again, I don't see it making that big of a difference. There's these things called litter screens that they have in open landfills. So excuse me, as wind conditions change, they move these screens around to capture that escaped waste. We've talked about ideas of miniaturizing them. We you know, you've seen those like kind of swirling wind patterns, like swirling leaves and trash and this little tornado. You know, if we set it up in a spot where we can actually let Mother Nature do the work for us and push it into these screens and just clean out those sections, that could be a way to keep certain sections cleaner. Similarly with storm drains, just better technology for keeping the waste materials out of our waterways. This is a very simple one. So in some neighborhoods, you'll have street sweeping on Monday, and then you'll have recology pickup on a Tuesday. And we know for sure things are falling out of the trash bins during trash pickup day. We know this because you'll go clean a section right before they come, let recology do their thing, and you come back and look and count the trash that's out there, and you always find things. So what if we just switch that, right? So recology comes to pick up on Monday, and then street sweeping comes on Tuesday, or even later that day on Monday. Then you should hopefully be able to clean up a lot of that escaped waste, and it shouldn't cost anything more, right? It's the same number of street miles swept. It's just a coordination problem. So, you know, I've kind of looked at this. It's very hard because they have kind of these ingrained efficient systems. If it were to change, it most likely have to be from the recology side. And so you just get a notice and say, look, your pickup day has changed to this date. And then they can kind of coordinate that with the existing street sweeper schedule that they have, you know, to change like all the infrastructure of, you know, parking enforcement for street sweeping days and rerouting these, what they call brooms, the street sweeper. It's quite difficult. So I think it would have to be on the recology end. Again, cigarette butts, these are the bane of my existence. They're everywhere. This is an interesting thing. It's called a portable ashtray. So our local Surfrider chapter, Surfrider is this now national organization that's focused on keeping waterways and oceanways clean. They have a hold on to your butts campaign. And so part of that's distributing these pocket ashtrays that smokers can put their butts into and later responsibly dispose of them. Here, this big yellow thing is called a ballot bin. They have this in the UK, and it poses the question, says, who's the best soccer player in the world, or what's the best superpower? And smokers will put in their butts to get in their votes. They say people even pick them up off the ground to vote for their pick. So kind of fun, innovative way. Fines. So here in California, first time offense could be $100 to $1,000. You could get 8 to 10 hours of community service. Contrast that with Japan. Fines can be up to $80,000 and prison terms of up to 8 years for habitual litterers. So I don't know if that will work here in kind of our Wild West rugged individual society. I can see people just taking that ticket and just crumpling it up, throwing it right in front of the code enforcer. So I think education is probably the best way. a more sustainable way to elicit culture change. I really believe if more smokers knew there were plastics in those buds and really were more conscious of of that pollution, that many of them would actually change their habits. So, education is definitely someplace that we should put our resources and money behind. Street cleaning teams. So I mentioned briefly that San Francisco Public Works has these paid positions called corridor ambassadors. And so you'll find them pushing carts and sweeping up in many of the busy commercial districts. The good ones work really, really well. There's a guy named Calvin. He's actually featured in this one. He works on in the marina along Chestnut Street. And I can attest that Chestnut Street itself is very, very clean because of his work. He's kind of the gold standard. But if you go out into the side streets, that's where you're going to find a lot of trash. Here on the right is a program, a nonprofit called Downtown Streets Team. Really, really amazing. Started down in San Jose, but now they have chapters all over the Bay Area. And it's basically a stipend work program for homeless people to help clean the streets and to give them some structure to the life, some opportunity. And they've now dovetailed that into a work placement program after they graduate from this Clean Street program. And it's a win-win, right? You're giving homeless people opportunity and also cleaning the streets. And so it's really amazing. They're really only limited in the funding that they can receive. I always point that this is ultimately a cultural issue, because in Japan, if any of you are lucky enough to visit there, it is so clean there on whole. And a lot of that is just the way that they behave and their mindset. They sort their trash into this elaborate system so it's properly going to the right places. Most schools don't have custodians or janitors. The students are responsible for cleaning. So if you're talking about imprinting from a very young age, it doesn't get much better than that. And so, and you might have seen some of the Japanese soccer fans during the World Cup. They stay after the game and they clean up the stadium and they interview them and they say, wow, this is amazing. And the Japanese people are like, why are you even talking to us? This isn't even a thing. This isn't even a story. It's just what we do. So that's what I hope that we can import to San Francisco and make it clean, because we as a society want it that way. And so here are some, different groups and organizations that are also focused on cleanliness. And so what I'm trying to say here is it definitely takes a group effort. But on an individual level, finally, chapter 4, what can you do to elicit change? And actually, there is quite a lot, even on an individual level. It takes a lot of people doing a lot of little things to make a huge impact, but I am hopeful here in San Francisco that we can do that. So here are just examples of individuals stepping up to do something about it. Here is a story about this gentleman named Afraj Shah, who grew up in India outside of Mumbai. This was his childhood beach. And you saw briefly, it was basically a landfill. They've just let it become a place where people dump all their trash, all the things that go in the rivers, go into the bay and sweep, wash back up onto the shore. And just one day he got tired of it and started picking up trash one at a time, filling up bags. And other people saw him and started to join him. And then they got the government support. And under 3 years, they cleared 5 million kilograms of trash off the beach, turned it into a landfill and back into a usable beach, which you'll see kind of the before and afters here. And amazing things happened, like the turtles started coming back. And, again, just one person's, just standing up and deciding to do something about it. Here, bottom right, this is kind of a local hero of mine. Her name's Mary Clipp, and she lives in Twin Peaks and almost daily goes up and down cleaning. She's a polio survivor, so she only has use of one arm. And so even with one arm, she's doing this. I've actually copied this kind of little rig that she's set up, which is a dolly with a trash can on it. And so that's what you'll see me in the inner Richmond or citywide rolling around with. And I have Mary as my inspiration to thank for that. But again, and I show this to the students and kids and I say, how many hands do you have? And they're like, we have 2. It's like, well, you should be doing at least twice as much as Mary, right? So the idea is that you are empowered to do something and you can make a tangible difference. Going back to Japan, this is another example. This is an organization called Greenbird. And so they have done a lot of what we're trying to emulate on the refuse side, which is setting up these neighborhood cleanups that make it very easy for people to drop in, spend a little time, very low barrier to entry, and then contribute and make a difference. So they've created this network and schedule of these pop-in cleanups. And so we have that too. Amazingly, this weekend, all organically organized cleanups, not any of us, creating this big one-time event. We have 19 separate cleanups this weekend. And I don't know of any other city in the United States that's doing, or let alone the world that's doing what we're doing. So I keep saying we're the best kept secret in San Francisco, because our biggest hurdle right now is just awareness. Most people in San Francisco have not even heard of what we're doing, even though we've organized over 1,100 cleanups over the past 2 years. So really what I need everyone here, your help is to join our cleanup. Please come out to the cleanup that you guys are organizing on Earth Day on the 22nd at the Parnassus campus. That our area is, it's not so dirty, but always needs help. You're going to just see, when you put it all together, you're like, wow, I can't believe how many little pieces of trash there are littered everywhere on our street. Second, keep spreading the word. Please mention this to your friends, bring a friend, ask them to help out. The 311 app, everyone should have that downloaded on their mobile phone. And if you see things like dumped items and furniture, overflowing trash cans, big trash piles, just report that to the city. We're their eyes and ears, and they do quite a good job. That's your taxpayer dollars at work. Most things that are reported get resolved within 8 hours as far as street cleanliness goes. So these are all things that you can do to get the word out, participate. If you want to go a step further, there's things you can do with Refuse Refuse of being a backup cleanup leader, doing outreach like tabling at farmers markets. We hang door hangers, we put up flyers. So these are different ways you can get involved, more involved. And again, just continue to show up, getting tools to clean on your own block. You have the most self-interested for your own clean neighborhood. The Department of Public Works has an Adopt a Street program where they actually provide these cleanup materials to you for free. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me and I can connect you or provide you with that. So my email is just info@refuserefusesf.org, and hopefully I'll have maybe Dorla kind of share my information for you to get in touch. But that concludes my presentation, and we'll open it up for questions here.
Hi, Vince. That was great. There was a lot of really good information in that I think we should really have you back, and we could share that with a larger group. It's inspirational to get other communities involved, and it's kind of hard to like wrap your head around like how you could actually manage this, but you really provided a lot of really great examples of how even one person can make a difference. So if anybody has any questions or comments, please put them in the chat or Q&A, and we'll be able to answer those. But yeah, I always when I walk into grocery stores, sometimes all I see is just like, it's just one big building of trash, because that is all going to end up in trash cans and hopefully compost, but you don't know. So I mean, do you do any kind of like policy outreach, or have you kind of thought of that? Or I mean, on the bigger issue, I mean, because that's really it's a society thing, and it's like, how do you manage that? I mean,
for me, my approach is more bottom up, right? So it's really hard to move these large systems and the inertia of the consumer packaged good industry of just producing all these waste materials. And so what are we going to do? We're not going to buy these products because you can maybe do more farmers markets or buying things with reusable materials. So we can vote with our dollars and our behavior. So that's really where our point is, like, individually, you have to start with yourself and be the change. And now what that has done, though, is like, we do get doors open for us because they see we're demonstrating that we care for our neighborhoods enough to go manually pick up trash one by one. So we can have these meetings with legislators to try to get policies changed. For example, again, cigarette butts. So we're working with some groups to try to either ban cigarettes altogether. So New Zealand, if you've seen in the news, has banned sales to cigarettes for people who will come of age after a certain year. So that's maybe something we could do. Banning the filters themselves. They don't actually filter anything. It's just a marketing gimmick. So if we ban those, at least there's less cigarette butt waste. The other idea is a cash redemption value for cigarette butts. imagine just like our bottles and cans that people pay a deposit and they have to bring butts back to receive that deposit, then you wouldn't see butts, you'd have people returning them or scavengers picking them up to return them for dollars. So, there's things that potentially can be done from the policy side, and that, I admit what we're doing with the cleanups is just treating a symptom, but there's many things that we can do. And guess what? Treating a symptom actually does work. So we'll keep focusing on that on the individual level.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think, yeah, definitely starting from the ground up and, leading by example is really kind of what it's all about. So I don't see any questions, but again, for those that are viewing this, we are having an outreach on the 22nd. I believe that's the date. It's next Saturday, if that's easier. So we hope to see you out. Please feel free to bring your family with you. Definitely kids are welcome. So I do have a comment. It says, thanks for all the important work you do. Are you aware of similar programs in other cities in Bay Area?
Kind of loosely. So I think, Berkeley, there used to be a group that did it. I don't know how active they are. Oakland has a Keeping America Beautiful chapter. Again, I don't know how active they are. I think they used to do cleanups around Lake Merritt. I recently learned and doing some research that Alameda, their water sewer department actually will help you organize a neighborhood cleanup. So there's some things. But yeah, I think we were talking earlier. I think we're really focusing on San Francisco, and hopefully the other area communities will be inspired and can start up their own or get resources from their own city governments to help them.
Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I think we are going to end it here. Again, thank you, Vince. It was really good. We'll definitely keep in touch.